They've been watching you like you're a puzzle missing too many edge pieces. Not because you're loud, not because you parade your power, but because you move like silence wearing a tailored suit. Calculated, detached, unreadable. They hate that. People who crave control always hate what they can't decode. You became the subject of their 24/7 surveillance. The way you walk, who you speak to, what you post, when you disappear. They track your shadow hoping it'll spill your secrets. They replay conversations in their head, analyze your pauses, your half smiles, the gaps between your words, as if revelation hides in the negative space. But you're too evolved for pattern recognition. You're not a person. You're a shifting algorithm. And algorithms don't obey curiosity. They punish it. They can't figure out who you are because they keep looking for behavior instead of intent. But you've rewritten both. You don't broadcast your evolution. You don't campaign for understanding. You don't breadcrumb your identity through digital footprints or staged vulnerability. You became a maze with no map, a door with no handle, a signal too encrypted for their shallow frequency. They want to label you, and that's their first mistake. Labels belong to products. You stopped being a product the moment you realized how many people only loved the version of you they could predict. Now they can't even track what you believe in. One day you move with monk, like detachment. The next you stare into chaos and smile like it's home. You left the binary a long time ago, and they're still trying to box you in using kindergarten psychology. They monitor everything now. Your absence terrifies them more than your presence ever did. They check your timestamps like forensic investigators, wondering what silence means. Is it peace? Is it plotting? Is it disconnect? They don't realize that someone like you doesn't leave trails. You leave consequences. They follow your echo, and it still leads nowhere. You're untraceable not because you're hiding, but because you've shed every layer they thought would define you. They still don't know what fuels you. They guess. They assume it's revenge, or ego, or insecurity wrapped in mystique. They never stop to consider the terrifying alternative. What if you genuinely don't care? What if you outgrew even the desire to be seen? That's what keeps them awake. Not your presence, but your unpredictability. They watch you rise, then go still. Speak wisdom, then vanish. Laugh with madness, then mourn like a poet. You became all the archetypes and none of them. And that contradiction, it collapses their entire framework. You weren't supposed to evolve in silence. You weren't supposed to get stronger without spectacle. But you did. You upgraded in the shadows while they performed clarity in the spotlight. You didn't need their eyes on you. You needed your mind under control. And now that it is, now that your discipline walks ahead of your personality, you've become an anomaly, someone too clear to control, too chaotic to define. The psychology behind your enigma is simple. Most people crave to be understood because it makes them feel safe. You abandoned the need for safety when you realized it's often just a padded room disguised as acceptance. You chose solitude over surveillance, silence over performance. And when you returned to the world, you wore your ambiguity like armor. You don't offer conclusions. You offer tension. The kind of tension that makes people rethink their own identity after spending too long in your presence. You say little, but every word lands with surgical accuracy. You smile, but it's never polite. It's calculated. They see it. They feel it. They flinch, not because you're dangerous, but because you see right through them while remaining unreadable yourself. They try to trace your past for patterns, not realizing you've rewritten your personality more times than they've revised their opinions. You're not evolving. You're curating. You're shedding layers so precisely that each version of you becomes a decoy. They try to pin you to who you were last month, last year, last mistake. And by the time they adjust, you've already upgraded again. They monitor your tone, your reactions, even your indifference, especially your indifference, because nothing terrifies a manipulator more than someone who has no emotional leash. You became unplayable, not because you resisted, but because you stopped being on the board entirely. They can't figure out who you are because they keep trying to understand you using methods designed for people who still crave approval. But you burned that bridge with no witnesses. You don't perform anymore. You disrupt. You don't prove. You exist. And your existence, in its rawest form, is a threat to their entire operating system. Because if someone like you can move in silence and still bend outcomes, what does that say about their entire identity built on noise? They're obsessed now. They might not admit it, but they are. They study your stillness, try to translate your cryptic moves. They discuss you behind closed doors, but it always ends the same. I just can't tell what they're thinking. That sentence, that failure to decode you, is your crown. You don't need to dominate with force. You dominate with mystique. They can't touch you, because touching you would require understanding you. And understanding you would require descending into the levels of self-awareness they're not ready to visit. They don't listen to what you said. They listen to what you didn't. That's the difference between obsession and observation. One devours facts. The other drinks silence. And with you, they were never after facts. They wanted access. Not to your words, to your wiring. They sit alone in the aftershock of your presence, like analysts dissecting a piece of art they're too primitive to recreate, replaying your last conversation like it was an encrypted broadcast from a higher realm. They study your pauses like sacred texts, as if revelation lies tucked inside every breath you held, every glance you redirected. It's not the statement that confuses them. It's the silence between sentences. The space where they felt something but couldn't prove it. The psychological air pocket that whispered, "You know more than you say." You left them starving for closure, and that emptiness became their addiction. They trace your expressions like investigators at a crime scene, hoping to find fingerprints on metaphors you never fully unwrapped. They remember the way your lips curled, not into a smirk, but into a weapon. Half smiles with full consequences. And now, every interaction they had with you replays like surveillance footage they can't decrypt. The way you looked at them mid-lie. The way your eyes narrowed when they shifted blame. You didn't call them out. You marked them. Subtle. Surgical. And that's what terrifies them. You didn't just hear them. You read them. You interpreted frequency, not phrasing. And now they suspect that every word you let pass was chosen, not spoken. They sit awake now, recalibrating memories, wondering when exactly they lost control. Wondering if you knew all along, which you did. You just didn't tell them. You let the silence ring. Because you understand something they never will. True power doesn't interrupt. It watches. And when necessary, it exits, calmly, unapologetically, leaving the room haunted by what it didn't explain. That's what they're stuck with. A ghost made of unspoken truth. A version of you that never shouted, never proved, never exposed. Just vanished with enough implication to keep them spiraling for years. They assumed they could read you. That you were transparent. Predictable. Someone who wore their emotions like armor. They didn't realize your face was a decoy. Your tone was a decoy. Everything you gave them was intentionally curated. Not to deceive, but to distance. You didn't lie. You just didn't offer a blueprint. And now, they chase shadows. They tell others about the time you went quiet mid-sentence, as if that silence held a prophecy. They romanticize the way you'd change subjects, as if deflection was divine. They rewatch conversations in their minds like surveillance agents, trying to prove you were hiding something. And in doing so, They exposed the only truth you ever needed them to see, that your mystery will outlive their assumptions. You crafted each conversation like a riddle, not to confuse, but to filter. You let them misinterpret. You let them believe they understood, because you understood them. You were never interested in being known. You were studying, documenting, measuring how much truth they could handle. Spoiler alerting, not much. And now, the distance is devouring them. Because when someone who thought they had access realizes they never even had a key, they don't let go. They dissect. They overanalyze. They create conspiracy theories out of your breath patterns. They become obsessed, not with who you are, but with how they failed to map you. The psychology is simpleg. The mind craves resolution. Unanswered energy becomes a virus in the brain. You didn't offer them a narrative. You left them in a maze. And now they're running in circles, whispering your name at every turn, trying to pinpoint when the energy shifted. When you started seeing them differently, they assume it was recent. They're wrong. You knew from the start, but you were patient. Let them speak. Let them perform. And now, every line they delivered replays in their own head. Distorted, exposed, heavy with regret. You're not their memory. You're their unsolved case. They don't understand how someone can walk away without slamming the door. They don't get that you didn't need to rage because you already won. Your detachment wasn't cold. It was calculated. Because you understand silence as a scalpel. You let them write their version of you in their minds. Then you vanished. And now, they're left with a puzzle where the corners don't fit. They go back through texts. Reread your final message. Search for subtext in your periods, your phrasing, the shift in your punctuation. You didn't ghost them. You left them haunted. That's more permanent. That's more surgical. This is what they can't process. You weren't trying to be mysterious. You were trying to be precise. You knew too much to say anything. You calculated what they could absorb, what they would reject, and what they would weaponize. So you left the gaps. You let their guilt fill them in. Because that's the final trick. When you walk away with restraint, they write the confession for you. They remember their own lies, their own schemes, their own moments of manipulation. And with every half smile you gave them, every incomplete sentence, every nod you never explained, they start confessing to crimes you never needed to mention. You weren't a mystery. You were a mirror. A quiet one. A dangerous one. One that didn't distort, just reflected. And the closer they got, the more they saw their own intentions, not yours. You were the test, the control variable. And now, their obsession isn't with understanding you. It's with understanding how they were seen so clearly by someone who said so little. They underestimated you. That's what makes it worse. You never had to raise your voice. You just had to leave. And now, they chase the negative space, as if the truth they miss still lingers there, wrapped inside the pauses, between the smiles, hidden forever in the silence that swallowed them whole.